there are cars that people recognize. And then there are cars that people remember in detail, not just because they saw them once, but because something about their design, their presence, or the way they were used on screen made them impossible to forget. And when that happens, it's no longer just about a vehicle appearing in a movie. It's about a machine becoming part of the identity of that story. Something that feels inseparable from the scenes themselves. Now, if we're going to talk about cars that truly left a mark in movies, we have to start with the ones that were built for speed, the ones where the engine wasn't just running, it was screaming, the kind of cars that weren't just part of the scene, but drove the action forward, machines that defined entire chase sequences and changed how audiences experienced movement and intensity on screen. When it comes to precision engineering in modern car culture, the Nissan Skyline GTR R34 stands out immediately, because unlike classic muscle cars that rely on raw power, this car is defined by control, its all-wheel drive system, advanced traction control, and highly tunable inline-six engine made it incredibly capable, especially in high-speed driving situations, and visually. It has a very distinct look, squared lines, a relatively compact body, and those iconic circular taillights that make it instantly recognizable even at night. And in the films, it's often shown cornering with precision rather than just going fast in a straight line, which helped redefine what performance looked like for a generation. In contrast, the Dodge Charger R/T1970 is all about presence, long hood, wide stance, and most importantly, that massive supercharger sticking out of the hood, something you notice immediately because it physically breaks the clean lines of the car, making the engine visible and impossible to ignore, and that detail alone communicates everything about the car. This is not subtle. This is power made visible. And when it accelerates, the front lifts slightly. The sound is deep and aggressive. And it feels like the entire car is built around delivering as much force as possible in a straight line. The Lotus Esprit is one of the best examples of that, because at first glance, it looks like a typical 1970s sports car, low to the ground, sharp edges, almost wedge-shaped, with a very flat front and a profile that looks like it was drawn with a ruler, a design that was meant to reduce drag and give it a futuristic appearance. But what made it unforgettable wasn't just its shape, it was what happened to it. Because in The Spy Who Loved Me, that same car drives off a pier, and instead of sinking, it seals itself, extends fins, and transforms into a fully functional submarine, complete with propellers and torpedoes, and that transformation created one of the most surprising moments in film history. The Audi R8 represents modern engineering in its cleanest form, low profile, wide body, a very distinctive side blade behind the doors that breaks up the shape of the car, and LED headlights that give it a sharp, almost technological look, and that design fits perfectly with the character driving it, because it looks advanced without being exaggerated, powerful without being loud, and precise in every detail. But not every iconic movie car became famous because of speed. Some stood out because they were completely different from everything else on the road. Cars that didn't try to look aggressive or powerful, but instead created their own identity through design, personality, or even unusual concepts that made them instantly recognizable. The Volkswagen Beetle Herbie takes the opposite approach because visually it's one of the simplest cars on this list, a rounded body, compact size, headlights that almost look like eyes, and a shape that feels friendly rather than aggressive. But that simplicity is exactly what made it work, because when you give a car like that personality, when it starts moving on its own, reacting, making decisions, suddenly those simple design elements become expressive. The slight tilt of the body, the way it turns, even the sound of the engine starts to feel intentional. And that's what made Herbie stand out, not performance, not speed, but the illusion that it was alive. The Mystery Machine is memorable for a completely different reason. Its design is intentionally exaggerated, bright turquoise body, green panels, orange flowers painted on the sides, and a boxy van shape that gives it a very recognizable silhouette. And unlike most vehicles that try to look sleek or powerful, this one embraces being unusual. And that's exactly why it works, because even from a distance, even in a quick shot, you immediately know what it is. The Tucker 48 stands out because of the ideas behind it. Visually, It already looks different from other cars of its time, with a central headlight mounted in the middle of the front that turns with the steering, smoother curves compared to the more boxy cars of the late 1940s, and a rear engine layout that was uncommon in American cars at the time. But beyond that, it introduced safety concepts that were far ahead of its era, like a reinforced passenger compartment and a windshield designed to pop out during a collision, and that combination of innovation and design is what makes it so interesting. And then there are the machines that dominate purely by presence, the ones that feel heavy, powerful, almost intimidating, vehicles that don't just exist in the scene but take over the screen, with designs that emphasize strength, durability, and a kind of controlled aggression that makes them impossible to ignore. The Tumbler Batmobile takes a completely different direction, because instead of looking like a traditional car, it looks like a military prototype, wide, armored, with oversized tires, angular panels, and a stance that feels more like a tank than a sports car. And unlike previous versions of the Batmobile, this one doesn't rely on elegance or curves. It's built around function. You can see suspension components. The vehicle sits high off the ground, and everything about it suggests durability and strength, which makes it feel believable in a real-world setting. And finally, the Peterbilt 379 is something entirely different in scale, a long-nosed semi-truck with a tall chrome grille, vertical exhaust stacks rising behind the cab, and a design that emphasizes size and strength. And what makes it so memorable is how those features translate when it transforms. The grille becomes part of the chest, the exhaust stacks become recognizable elements even in robot form, meaning that even after the transformation, you can still see the truck within the character, and that continuity is what makes it so effective. When you look at these vehicles more closely, what stands out is that each one has very specific details that make it memorable, not just vague ideas of speed or power, but physical characteristics, shapes, sounds, and behaviors that stay with people. And that's what turns a car into something more than just a prop. It turns it into something that audiences recognize instantly, even years later.